Spoštovani gostje, dovolite, da vas za takole uvod prav lepo pozdravimo. Nekateri ste že bili danes z nami in predvsem odkrivali neskončne dimenzije znanja, mogoče tudi kakšne nove poti, ki vas bodo popeljali do ciljev. Pa vendar, se nam je pridružilo kar nekaj gostov iz tujine in ker nas bodo bomo seveda dogodek imeli v angleščini, če se seveda s tem strinjate, in kot veste, bomo tudi okroglo mizo speljali tako, ker bo vse to potekalo tudi na spletni strani, potem posnetek bodo lahko gledali v tujini. Zatorej dovolite zdaj, da pozdravimo vse goste, tudi tiste, ki nas spremljate preko socialnih medijev. So, dear guests, good afternoon and officially welcome. You know, in the brave of new digitized world, smart solutions based on new technologies and interconnectivity are the next logical stepping stone which will drive the regional development. And certain regions and cities in the European Union and Slovenia are becoming more aware of smart solutions and how they can economically, environmentally and socially improve quality of living of population and consequently diminish regional disparities on both EU and national lives. So during workshop earlier today, participants were already presented with the example of smart solution. This was bike sharing system and its implementation in Slovenia, its impact and obstacles cities face with their deployment. But now during the panel discussion, with the help of our guest speakers, we will try to assess a potential of current implementation of smart solutions in Slovenia and EU within the EU cohesion policy framework. How are they already shaping the present and how far we from full integration of smart solutions into smart cities? We will get into these interesting details a bit later in a panel discussion, but let me now say a few words on organizers. So, as you know, this event is founded and supported by European Library Forum together with Zavod 14 and Institut Novum and Friedrich Naumann Stiftung. And if you wish, do please share your comments, maybe thoughts or photos on our social network connection, you know, Facebook, Twitter, and you can check on the ELF roll-up, the blue one on the site. But without further ado, I kindly invite Mr. Alexander Aristonik, Director of Institute 14, Zavod 14, to say a few welcome words. Please.
Distinguished State Secretary, dear participants of the round table, dear partners, dear guests, dear liberal friends. On behalf of Zavod 14, it's indeed my honor and great privilege to welcome you all to our third international event this year. We are honestly delighted to have you here at today's event, which is organized, as already mentioned, by Zavod 14 and of course by our partners, European Liberal Forum, Friedrich Naumann Foundation and Novum Institute. Zavod 14 is a non-profit civil society aims to promote social liberal ideas. In 2018, we have successful year, and we already organized a series of events related to the NGOs, issues relating to the young people in the 21st century, challenges of blockchain, and also sharing economy. Today's event is focused on topical issue, smart cities and communities and their close relations to the EU regional policy. In fact, nowadays, digitized world, smart solutions based on new technology is the next logical step for regional development. regions across the European Union have developed their national or regional innovation strategies for smart specializations. Today, strategic framework for the innovation-driven economic transformation of European regions are priorities for the investments. They address emerging opportunities and market developments in order to build a competitive advantage by developing and matching research and innovative strengths for businesses. And of course, it's very important to stress European structural investment funds, which are main financing source and the main source to establish smart regions within the EU. This as a concept is still in the early stage. We already have examples of the communities and cities who benefited from implemented smart solutions. Advancement of communities and cities through interconnectivity of new technologies has a great potential for the impact of the EU at local, regional and national levels. During today's workshop, participants have already learned about examples of smart solutions. We focused on bike sharing systems, which is something we took a look at examples of implementation of this solution in Slovenia and their impact and obstacles cities face with their development. During the roundtable, with the help of our distinguished guests, we'll try to assess the potential of current implementation of smart solutions in Slovenia and the EU within the EU cohesion policy framework. We will also try to address the potential obstacles and possible solutions for the faster and more widespread implementation of smart regions. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next long-term EU budget 2021-2027, the Commission proposes the modernized cohesion policy, the EU main investment policy and one of its most concrete expression of solidarity. One of the main aims will be focused on smarter Europe through innovation, digitization, economic transformation and support to small and medium-sized businesses. Smarter Europe, greener Europe, more connected Europe and Europe closer to the citizens by supporting local-led development strategies and sustainable urban developments across the EU will be ultimate goal of forthcoming new period of EU regional policy. Zavod 14 is well aware of the potential of the EU regional policy, but also some drawbacks. Therefore, we will also be very proud to have opportunity to be leading partner in our forthcoming publication, titled European Regional Development, Fate, Fortune, or Good Policies, which will be presented later in our program. Just before I conclude, let me just inform you that in 2019, Zavod 14 will continue to host more domestic and international events, and you will be informed on time about them. Therefore, on behalf of Zavod 14 and our partners, let me finally wish you an interesting and fruitful discussion and hope to see you at our event next year. Thank you.
Ja, in če ste že ravno omenili dogodke, ravno prejšnji teden je sicer v Evropi potekal dogodek prav na temo liberalnega dialoga. In ker ste omenili torej vse, kdo sodeluje na splošno pri organizaciji, today's event is co-organized by European Liberal Forum and a member of the board is with us, Mr. Goran Neralic. Please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to shortly present ELF here in Ljubljana. This is actually my first official presentation of ELF as a board member. I was only elected like 2 months ago. I'm also delighted that the topic of this event is smart cities. Because at my heart, I'm still a local politician. I'm a local councillor in Jastrebarsko. I don't know if you know it. But I'm very happy to see, maybe see from this discussion whether some smart city solutions are also applicable in my city. So I hope for a productive discussion. But before I say something about ELF, I would just like to thank Alexander, Sebastian, Novum Institute and Zavod 14 for inviting me. So about ELF. ELF is a network of political foundations, NGOs and think tanks from 21 countries. We have 39 member organizations, and we do about 100 activities each year. So what we do policy development, capacity building, and public events, conferences, where we try to spread the liberal message to the public. ELF is also a political foundation of the ALDE party. So ELF was directly involved in the creation of the ALDE party manifesto, with which liberals will run the next European Parliament elections. Because we had expert forums, and these forums and discussions fed into the final manifesto, which was adopted just last month in Madrid. I would stop here. So if you want to know more about ELF, I'm available during the break, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And I wish you productive discussions during the panel. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. Ampak ja, je že res, da včasih ljudi ne zdrami niti vsebina, kakšen teoretični cilj, ampak predvsem številke. Zato imamo med nami tudi posebnega gosta z ministrstva. Torej, we have with us a guest from Ministry for Environment and Spatial Planning, Mr. Simon Zajc, State Secretary. Please join us with a short address.
Thank you. Good evening. I usually like to speak from my heart, but since we are doing this event in English, allow me to read out a few thoughts that we have prepared on our ministry. The environment and spatial planning are without a doubt intertwined in many ways. The extent to which cities and communities incorporate economic, environmental and social considerations into their growth and development determine also the quality of life of their residents. Broadly speaking, dealing with already existing and future environmental challenges requires a holistic approach involving a variety of stakeholders, including the residents of cities and communities who might sometimes feel ignored. Good practice examples from Slovenia and other European cities show that when the general public is included in the policy development process, it improves the acceptance and leads to better solutions. In Slovenia, municipalities play the extensive role in spatial and urban planning, housing, water management and environmental protection. The new spatial planning law, which came into effect in June this year, placed climate change adaptation as one of the goals of spatial planning. Many good practice examples can also be seen in Slovenia, where cities have recognized opportunities to design or implement in a sustainable way. This is going to be the... Oh, I'm back. The sustainable way. To improve the quality of the air, for example, measures adopted by municipalities have, among others, included closing down city centers for certain types of vehicles, improving and increasing the cycling infrastructure, implementing bicycle and car sharing systems, and purchase of municipal vehicles and buses with Euro 6 class standard. Development of so-called smart cities must start with an effective and strategic planning, with cities recognizing their potential and developing a vision, followed by concrete policies and measures in order to achieve this vision. Technology development and digitalization play an important part in this context. At the Ministry for the Environment and Spatial Planning, and also here in Ljubljana and Slovenia in general, we fully support and strive towards development of smart cities and communities, since we believe that this leads to the higher quality of life and raises the competitiveness of the entire region, which we also believe that in the global world is really important. So thank you for your attention, and this is all from me.
Thank you. You can give it to me if you want. Yeah, it's totally different, you know, speak by heart like this, and otherwise, if you must speak something, you know, to other guys because they're watching now live. But, you know, Zavod of Institute 14, Zavod 14, like we said in Slovenia, together with ELF prepared a publication of European regional development connected to this project. So you can find the publication on the web page of Zavod 14 and European Liberal Forum, and the written version will be available in a few days. But now I kindly invite Mr. Rok Spruk to present it. Maybe we need it because of, because we're going live.
Okay. Oh, does it sound well? Okay. So this publication is about European regional development, right? So together with our contributors, right, apart from me, right, these are, they come from Italy, from Rome. These are Giulia Carnevale, Aurelia Chiacci, Alessio Conti, Mitja Kovac from the University of Ljubljana, Walter Paternesi Meloni, and Giovanni Vetrito, right? We prepared a publication tackling perhaps one of the most important questions, not perhaps only in economics, right, but mainly in social science in general, right? So today I will talk briefly about the big divide within the European Union, and later on I will also try to identify the drivers of European regional development based on this kind of publications. I will shortly present the results, right, in a matter and format generally accessible to a lay audience, right? So don't be afraid, there will be no broad-based academic discussion here. And later on I will move forward with policy implications. Okay, so the good presentations are the one where one picture doesn't need any further explanation. And I believe that this is basically one picture that doesn't need any further explanation. So basically this picture, the figure plots the distribution of GDP per capita within the European Union at NUTS 3, not NUTS 3, but NUTS 2 level. So basically the areas that are dark colored are basically the ones that have very low GDP per capita, and the ones brightly colored are the ones with a very high level of GDP per capita. So to put the pictures into a broad perspective, if you take the year 2016 as a reference year, a region such as Hamburg in northern Germany has a GDP per capita that is about 247% higher than that of Calabria, right, in Mezzogiorno, in the south of Italy, right? Or even, for example, if you use a different comparison, right, one of the most developed regions in Europe by GDP per capita is Oberbayern, the Upper Bavaria in Germany, and its GDP per capita, for example, is higher than that of Eastern Slovenia by a yawning 160%, right? So the question that we try to address in this publication is, what on earth explains these gaps, right? Even if you, for example, in this graph, you know, try to ignore the Central and Eastern Europe, so basically the countries that entered the EU in 2004, and if you only focus on the North-South comparison, right, the difference is still big, right? So the question that you might also want to ask, right, is how can a region in the south of Spain with a low level of income per capita, such as Jaén and Andalusia, approach the level of the frontier, you know, in the most developed regions of Europe, right? So what we try to do here is to carry out an econometric investigation, right, that will tell us, are these differences in GDP per capita driven by regional policies, right, what is usually known as the objective 1 through 3 policies, right? Or, for example, are regional policies doomed to complete failure, right? So are there any other factors that could explain, right, the differences in GDP per capita, right? Of course, this is not an exhaustive investigation, but we tried to consider two easily observable and identifiable determinants. And the first one is the institutional quality at the subnational level, right? In this case, we tried to capture the institutional quality at NUTS 2 level through a recent data set by Nicolas Charon and his team, right, from 2014. Where we constructed several indicators, right? And these indicators capture the level of corruption at the NUTS 2 level, and the second one is the level of government favoritism, right? This variable basically tells you how impartial the government administration at the local level might be. And with respect to human intelligence, we collected subnational test scores of 15-year-olds on 4 dimensions of intelligence: mathematics, science, reading, and problem-solving skills, right? In the first stage of the publication, we also try to consider financial literacy, right? But apart from the Italian regions, we found very few other observations, right? So in a sense, we have a repeated cross-section of 365 regions from EU 28 member states for a relatively long period that starts in 1990 and ends in 2015. So in total, we have about 4,000 sample-matched observations, and then we try to see how the growth, the GDP per capita and its growth rate responds to regional policies, institutional quality, and human intelligence at the subnational level, right? So these are basically our main results. What we show here is that basically with respect to regional per capita income, there are three policies that stand out with the highest and most pervasive positive impact on the level of GDP per capita. So the first one is the health policy. The second one is the labor market efficiency related policies, and the third one is the innovation policy. So those policymakers who are concerned about innovation, the good news from this publication is that yes, these policies actually gave positive benefits and positive premium on long-term development. But we can also see that, variables such as the impartiality of government service, right, and the level of corruption might have a very important impact. So to dig a little bit deeper into the question, right, we show that the influence, we try to quantify the influence of policy support, right, but the influence of these policies, institutional quality and human intelligence, depends on the level of development, right? So as Danny Roderick concluded in 2013 in his paper in Journal of Economic Growth, there is no one-size-fits-all variety, right, in terms of what is the right growth diagnostics and what is the right growth recipe and roadmap for the regions. What we show here is that regions that are under objective 1, right, these are the convergence regions, right, they tend to benefit quite strongly, right, from higher rates of infrastructure-related investments, health-related investments, and basic educational supports, as well as technology improvements. But, you know, once regions become more developed and enter the objective 3 tier, then we show that policies that strengthen labor market efficiency and especially firm-level innovation, right, they appear to be the key drivers of sustainable development, right? So, and of course, in our view, this is what policymakers should consider. Which policies are appropriate depending on the certain level of development, right? And we also show that regions with a better quality of governments, right, these are so those with relatively impartial and professional government administration and low level of corruption, they tend to grow much faster than the regions without it, right? And apart from that, we also show that taking together the level of human intelligence, of IQ, and quality of governments, they appear to be much more important for growth and development than regional policy support schemes, right? Which brings us to the very important question, right? So were European policymakers perhaps targeting for quite a long time the wrong objective, right? So perhaps the question to long-term development lies in how to foster the level of intelligence among the 15-year-olds and among the children, right? And perhaps, you know, these are not so expensive policy interventions to adopt, right? Of course, apart from the level of and quality of governance, right? Which, of course, is very important for long-run development as well. So in the econometric investigation, we carried out the extreme bound analysis of regional economic growth. So we took the average rate of economic growth per region from the period 1990 to the period 2000 to the year 2015. And then using sophisticated regression techniques, we looked at the determinant of all the possible policy, intelligence, and institutions-related determinants. And what did we figure out? So basically, this graph shows you on your left axis what is the size of the magnitude of this effect weighted by beta coefficients. And on the right scale, you can see the cumulative distribution function. So it's not something difficult to understand, but it tells you the percentage of time that the given variable statistically significantly explains regional growth disparities. Well, as you can see here, well, not a single, apart from higher education and then labor market efficiency, right, the variable that explains growth disparities most, right, doesn't have to do anything with, let's say, infrastructure-related investments, but with the reading skills of the 15-year-olds, right? So those regions where the youngsters are better prepared to read, to solve problems, right? They have better mathematics and science skills. They are significantly more, these regions are significantly more likely to achieve higher long-run growth, right? So basically, if you, and of course someone asks, so which regions in Europe have the highest readings and literacy skills? Well, of course, region number 1 is West Flanders, right, in Belgium, and region number 2 is Lombardia, right, in northern Italy. Okay, so on other hand, you know, problem solving and reading skills together with the degree of controlling corruption and labor market efficiency combined with higher education policies, they tend to explain regional growth effects quite strongly and robustly. And now, of course, the question that some might wonder, so is this a pessimistic picture, right, in a sense? So basically, does that mean that the European regional development is determined by fate, by fortune, or simply by a cleverly designed policy and institutional framework? So we try to estimate a counterfactual scenario, right? So the counterfactual scenario asks a very simple questions. Suppose you take an underperforming region, like Calabria in Italy, or Basilicata, or Jaén in Spain, right? How much would its per capita income increase if it improved the most relevant policy outcomes, institutional quality, and the level of human intelligence to the 90th percentile of the regional distribution? The 90th percentile, for example, of the average intelligence level corresponds to what we observe in Åland Islands, right, in Finland. So, and what the results show is that regions gaining most from improved labor market efficiency are mainly located in Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland, right? There we show that in the long run, if these regions had a very efficient and flexible, right, efficiency promoting labor market, right, their income per capita would decrease by between 111 and 130%. And even if someone focuses on the old EU member states, right, we show that the regions gaining most from efficient labor market, right, are located in Southern Europe, like most of southern Italy, and also together parts of Extremadura, Norte in Portugal, and Thessaly in Greece. So there we show that the effect is somewhere in the range between 52% and 86% in terms of potential per capita income increase. And we also show that there are very similar gains, right, from improved quality of governance and human intelligence, right? So I don't know if you see this. So basically this graph shows how much per capita income would increase in response to a reasonably efficient labor market at a regional level, right? And of course, as you can see, the regions in Eastern Europe and the regions in Southern Europe are the ones gaining most, right? You might wondering, so basically why the region, for example, of Südholland or Niederbayern in Germany doesn't gain much? Well, because it already has a reasonably efficient labor market, so the gains to be exhausted, there are quite few, right? The same results hold, or the same pattern is observed when we estimate a counterfactual scenario for the impartial government administration. As you can see here, the Eastern European regions would gain a lot if they had reasonably impartial government administration, the ones that are professional, without any kind of hidden cleavages, right, without political favoritism, right? And of course, if you exclude the southern Italy's and the Mediterranean part in Eastern Europe, you can see that, of course, in the old EU member states, these gains are relatively lower, right? And this holds also for the improved problem-solving skills, right? So, I will try to wrap up now, right? The regional policy effectiveness, again, depends on the level of development, as underdeveloped regions gain more from infrastructure-related investments, right? So our conclusion is that these investments should not be reduced, but strengthened, right? But they should be strengthened selectively, right? And of course, the regional growth and development in those regions that are under Objective 3, there the gains appear to be driven more by labor market efficiency and firm-level innovation, right? But of course, institutions should not be ignored, right? Because the results we have suggest that impartial government administration and low level of corruption appear to be relatively more important for regional development than the contribution of regional policies, right? in addition to a very beneficial effects of human intelligence, of course, which is something what regional policymakers have been quite reluctant to discuss. One reason is primarily the lack of observational data, and the other reasons are mainly political, right? So what we suggest is that perhaps closer attention should be paid to the pursuit of quick, cheap, and easy interventions that have profound and long-lasting impact on regional development. These should, for example, tackle the level of intelligence in early childhood, adolescent, and also perhaps at the level of parents, right? And then, of course, the positive conclusion and the optimistic view for the future is that maybe, under some circumstances, right, the regional gaps are not so difficult and costly to close after all, right? So, and thank you very much, right, for your attention, and for any questions, I'm at your disposal.
We will have this on the internet, right, for those who want to have a deeper view on this. Okay, on the internet you can find this. But thank you for your energetic and, concrete presentation. But for those who are following us on the video or maybe alive now, let me just say you that early afternoon today we had a workshop called Smart Solution for Regional Development, and it was case bike sharing system. And Mladen Bieljac from Smart Cities Bikes will tell us now more about the findings and even conclusions.
Thank you, and thank you for all the present here. Yes, as you heard earlier, we had a workshop which is within this, which was organized within this event, titled Smart Cities and Communities. Smart Cities and Communities is a very narrow term, as it joins plethora of solutions, high-tech solutions, ideas, concepts. So we needed to narrow down a bit the case that we were going to present at workshop and that we're going to debate about. So we decided to focus on smart on smart solution bike sharing systems. Why bike sharing systems? Well, first of all, bike sharing systems, if we take most of smart city solutions, is the most visible, most direct solution that you can use right now and see, and it's the solution that can affect at this moment have the greatest impact for cities and communities. It is also, well, if I just take a step back, if you take on one hand energy optimization of buildings, insulation, and etc. On the other hand, we take a smart or bike sharing solutions and systems presented, then you can see how immediate effect and visible solution is. Smart bike sharing systems are in itself not very new concept. Basically, it's based on bicycles, which is century-old concept. So we have a very old concept modified through technology. Currently, we are using third-generation bike sharing systems, which take use of all the technology that we have present, from communication protocols to identification protocols. So therefore, it is very, as I said, very old idea implemented into smart cities and communities. Also, I also wanted to just give you a short definition of bike sharing systems. Bike sharing system is basically a system of or network of stations which is present at certain location, city, municipality, and you can basically take a bike, rent a bike at one station, point A, and drive around the city and leave it at the point B. So basically it is meant for short-term usage and for mobility throughout the environment. Participants in today's workshop came from all different aspects of life. We had participants from municipalities, also we had different counselors or advisors, planners, and I in a way planned it as a very very creative chaos, the workshop, because we all shared the ideas. Questions were asked throughout the workshop. We also went into great details, which I can't present right now. I hope that all the participants gained a great insight into problems that might face them when introducing such technology. Specific problem is that, as I mentioned before, it's a very old concept, conjoined with the new technologies. And in a theory, there should be no problems when implementing such systems in our cities. But unfortunately, in the cases that I presented to them, we saw how many obstacles one have to overcome in order to implement something simple, under parentheses, something simple as bike sharing system. As later you will be able to hear throughout our panel, there are different segments to planning smart technologies and implementing, from suppliers, which are usually private companies, to operators, which are usually, in this case, municipalities and smart cities. I believe that's all for now, and I invite you to participate in our roundtable.
Roundtable, yes. Thank you. Because now discussions begins, but the moderator of the panel will be Mr. Gregor Planteric, and he will introduce the panelists, please.
Thank you. So first, thank you for being here. I would like to now invite our panelists. First, I would like to invite Ms. Zina Zlatanova from the Liberal Institute for Political Analysis in Bulgaria. Please. The next one, I would like to invite Dr. Dan Podjet from the Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts. Please. Then I would like to invite Klemen Potisek, the former State Secretary at the Ministry of Infrastructure. Please. And the next one, Dr. Nevenka Tsukiati from the SRIP Smart Cities and Communities from the Institute Josef Stefan. Then Dr. Marko Mavr from the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning. Please, if you take your seat. And then I would like to invite Mr. Miha Juvan from the City Municipality Kranj. And then Mr. Mladen Bjelac from the Smart City Bikes.
Gregor,
Thank you.
You have the microphone. The three are on the table, so you can take it, and maybe this one too.
Well, first, welcome again, everyone, also the people who are watching through our Facebook channel, which is live now. So if you have any comments or you want to also tweet on our Twitter channels, you can also use the hashtag #ELF-event so that we can easier find your tweets and comments. So, smart cities. Well, what is actually smart? No, everything is smart today. Smart cities, smart communities, smart devices, smart regulations. So when you hear the word smart cities, it's usually all about efficiency, optimization, technology, security, convenience, and stuff like that. But if you take it a little bit wider view, the smart city can also be a low-carbon city, where citizens start to behave differently because they have to accept changes, that people can participate in policy making. And you know, in the end effect, not everything is about sensors and computers, though we do need them to operate smart city. In such smart cities, they can tackle different environmental challenges, for example, air pollution, food waste issues, which is also quite a problem. Then, you know, they also have to make sure that everyone has access to basic services, because It's important, and also that cities have the access and the right to use the big data in the service of the city, because a lot of data is collected through cameras to different kind of system applications. So also it's important what is happening with that data. So I will perhaps, but first I will slowly start some, let's say, a little bit more warming up round, and let also our guests to present them little themselves. So I will ask Mr. Mladen first, because he also presents his system of bike rental, and also in other cities, and today workshop. More and more cities are opting for such solutions, whether it's bike rental or is it electric motors, electric vehicles, electric skiros, and stuff like that. So what are the advantages and the disadvantages of such solution?
I don't think I'm the right person to talk about the disadvantages of a solution that I'm providing and producing. But maybe if I modify your questions,
yes, please.
Maybe you could talk about problems that we encounter while trying to introduce smart solutions into environments. I can talk specifically about examples in Slovenia, because our company that I'm representing today, Smart City Bikes, we are developers and producers of bike sharing systems. Bike sharing systems are omnipresent throughout the world, but only in Slovenia it gained some presence in the past 5 years. We are, of course, we worked on bike sharing systems for longer than that, for past 8 years. But one of the first problems that we encounter with introducing new technologies is that people did not understand what exactly it's all about. In our case, again, specifically, we are talking about technology where our main customers are municipalities and cities. So we have a private company that provides something to city, to public. Therefore, we had to first educate and inform cities about the needs of such systems and importance. Most of the times, the range of understanding of the system was would be the comments of of people that we talked to was I used one of those systems in insert name of the random West European city like Paris, Barcelona, and so on and so on. But beyond that, there was no understanding of how the systems operate and all the benefits that they would have. So that was the first problem that we encountered, informing and educating municipalities in the importance of those systems. Once we overcame that problem, we had to work with them on how to properly plan such system. And also there is a problem of financing those systems, and I'm sure that you'll hear about those specific problems from my colleague on my right, Michael Juvan. So these are challenges that one private company, and usually it's the private companies that drive the development and new technologies, had to face with implementing something very banal as a bike sharing system. And on the other hand, my experience we're talking about smart cities, of course, is that for smart cities and smart technology, you need smart users, you need smart people. That's also something that needs to change slowly. We need to change perception of people, the understanding of things and how they work. One good example in Slovenia is recycling and of the garbage, and also separating our garbage. Decades ago, we would all use the same garbage bin for all the garbage, from plastic to paper and other recyclables. But slowly, our society changed in that way that I believe that most of Slovenians religiously separate our garbage, not only because there are fines, but also because our mentality changed, and we see the importance of such such actions. And maybe one thing that we haven't talked a lot during our workshop, and maybe we won't have time to talk during our roundtable, is the importance of sensors in smart cities. I'm talking strictly from the viewpoint of private company that develops and produces smart city solutions. Sensors are one thing that we need to measure our development and our success in implementing all the technologies. And also another thing is big data, all the information that we gather from all those smart components in one city or community that we install. So we also have those things that we need to analyze and further our development.
Thank you. So then I will ask Mr. Yuan, because he's actually the user, I mean, from the municipality. So what is actually your experience with introducing or integrating such technology, for example, like a bike sharing system?
Thank you for the question. Good evening. Municipalities are a level where things are usually implemented, where things happen. We had, I guess, quite many smart city solutions through the years. Like energy efficiency started like 18 years ago already in our municipality, but really the pace really became much stronger last 2-3 years. Also because of the public funds available. But it's true that municipalities are a little bit like a young woman, that all the producers want to come to you and sell your solutions and convince you that they're the best and this is exactly what you need. So yeah, it's very important to gather information because we are obliged to make public tenders. So if you don't know what you're buying, it's very hard to make successful public tender. This is definitely a thing that, for example, when we started with bike sharing, it took us almost a year and a half to actually be successful with the first few 5 or 6 stations to put them in place. And what we noticed later is that we had a lot of problems because we started in 5 and 6 stations, not with 50, because then we had a problem with national legislation which demands that you basically go for the end product. But we didn't know what our end product will be, how many stations, what kind of solutions, because electric bikes came later, just this last year. We also expanded and have project to make delivery bikes. They were also not in original plan. So to actually gather or be able to use European funds, we had quite a lot of difficulties to actually push these changes of the project through the years. Another problems were, or let's say challenges, no, that's no problems, were actually finding the right spaces, the budgeting, the minor cost that nobody predicted. For example, before we started, we didn't know how far the electric line is, or that this line you cannot use, but you actually have to go to this 100 meters further down the road and take that power line. Little things. It was very beneficial because I'm from public department from public utilities, that I basically kind of have all these tools on hand. So I could do a little bit pitch of tar without making investment, but was basically part of like maintenance costs. This was also the reason that we could basically make this tiny system that became now I don't know, there are like 25 stations, they're all electrified, and we're planning for some more. Okay, there are many other challenges that we have 2 commissions that's supposed to help us, but each commission have different idea what smart solution is, and they try to put their own agenda, so sometimes we just had to be a little bit quiet and just do it, you know, because otherwise we would we would lost a year. So yeah, it was a very interesting process, but I have to say already also very satisfying, because we have a lot of users, people like it. It's really well accepted by the people from municipality.
Thank you. So I see that, yes, the cooperation between public municipalities, so local communities and also state, but also so government in general, but also corporate is quite important. This is actually, we already talked about this a few sections before about so-called smart regulation. So, and because this is the topic, the joint cooperation, I will now ask Dr. Nevenka Tsekiati, because she is from the Strategic Research and Innovation Partnership from the Smart Cities and Communities at Josef Stefan Institute, and so it's already, the name says that there should be some cooperation behind. So can you a little bit present your vision or work of your organization and its involvement in the development and economic activities of Slovenia and also beyond?
It is a partnership. It is a partnership with different companies and other organizations, as well as research institutes and universities in all Slovenia. The result of this partnership are new products, technologies or services, which will integrate and upgrade existing Slovenian research and innovation achievement. We cooperate now about 130 members on different levels and focus areas. Our main purpose is to connect business and research institutions, so on the value chain, to set priorities for development investment and coordinate research and development activities. We can say also that Strategic Research and Innovation Partnership, also a cluster name, covers several research areas, also ICT key technologies. We can say about smart health, smart mobility, smart energy, smart safety, and so on. What are our experience? We have built support environment with professional services for industry and research, concentrating on proved new topic technologies, which will integrate and upgrade existing Slovenian research and innovation achievement. Together with our members, we have successfully applied for calls for different industry and research standards at ministries and launched several initiatives. So I hope I have.
I think it's for the beginning. It's and then of course we will continue now. And now I would ask, because of course also energy, infrastructure, and things like that are very important at the smart city and the smart region. So I will now ask Mr. Potisek, who is also an expert for energy issues, but perhaps more general now, because we were talking about holistic approach to the design of smart cities and communities. So could you a little bit present us this topic?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. Smart cities are actually quite complex sort of thing because they have many dimensions, and it's all about actually better utilization of assets and resources with the help of data. And of course, this data has to be processed, and it's all about, and this data is about, of course, mobility, transport, public transport, water treatment systems, bike sharing, car sharing, energy supply. You need energy to actually support every aspect of this, also other infrastructure. And it's, of course, all aimed at better urban living. So, in a way, smart cities are a natural evolution of what we have today, especially if we consider the fact that by 2050, as United Nations foresee, 80% of world population will be living in cities, so 80% of 10 billion people, and if we take into consideration that 60% of energy is today consumed in cities, I mean, that definitely makes it an area that we should get smart about. Yeah. Of course, today the cities also create around 70% of total amount of waste and greenhouse gas emissions. So when we talk about, and similar numbers go for water consumption. Now, if we take into account the Paris Agreement, our common actually bond to keep the temperature of our planet at 2 degrees Celsius lower in this century, it means that we have, of course, to use these resources better. And to use these resources better, we, of course, need a lot of change in society and also better use of resources, as mentioned. And to do that, we need data and we need capability to process this data. So, and of course, we all count on artificial intelligence to do that for us. So maybe for this time, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So, because we now talked also about environment and perhaps also spatial planning in general, I will ask now Mr. Mavar. Perhaps on the question which we discussed, why do smart solutions sometimes fail, and what we can learn from failures?
I think that's a really good question, because from failures we learn the biggest lessons. From my focus area, which was reduction of climate change mitigation, so reducing CO2 emissions, I think what we can learn, one of the biggest failures where maybe sometimes solutions or projects fail is because of lack of public engagement. And actually a better word for saying that would be lack of effective public engagement. Because as Micha and Mladen have said before, this can sometimes be a barrier introducing certain solutions or projects. So you have to start with education. You cannot just come into a city or into a community, introduce a project or a solution and expect it to work, because on paper and your research and your analysis it has worked. From my background, which is carbon capture and storage, one of the best examples of that is why certain projects have failed in the past was because of lack of engagements, where governments and the industry have worked together, everything, the permits and everything was in set, but because the public felt that it was not effectively engaged with, opposed the project, which eventually delayed it for a certain amount of years, and then it failed. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons that we can learn, is to start with, and not just lay public engagement, it's also with NGOs, research institutions, and really try to involve all stakeholders in the policy development process, because as Mr. Zait said in his introductory remarks, this engagement will lead to more effective policies and higher acceptance of these solutions. So
I think, yes, for starters, I think, yes. Now about finances, because many times was also discussed, and also the workshop, that it's quite difficult to get finances, especially for the local communities, to introduce such kind of smart technology. But of course, also there are a lot of ways, subventions, project. Also, the European Commission is supporting smart cities, or the introduction of innovative smart technology. So I will ask now Ms. Zlatanova from LIPA a little bit more about cohesion policy and financing smart city projects in the European Union, and of course also within the current and the next financial framework. If you could a little bit enlighten us on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gregor. My name is Zdenida Zlatanova. I'm representing the Bulgarian Liberal Institute for Political Analysis based in Sofia. We're a liberal NGO that is also a part of the European Liberal Forum network. As the member of the board presented it, I have a long career in public institutions in Bulgaria and at the European Commission too. One of them being the cohesion minister for my country for a certain period of time. So it's really very, very interesting to connect cohesion with all the smart things that are discussed these days. We're talking about innovation, digitalization, industrial modernization, also about circular economy, sharing economy. All these things you can find in the new programming period, strategies and drafts that are to be adopted in order to start the new funding from 2021. However, it's very interesting also to note that things are unfortunately a little bit difficult and complex to be implemented for, especially for small communities, small municipalities, who sometimes need even more smart solutions than more advanced. For example, does anybody of you know what RIS-3 means? And this is not the name of a new robot of Star Wars. This is research and innovation smart specialization strategy on the regional level. And you have to have it in order to apply for some of the innovation instruments that are at your disposal from the European Union. Of course, having said that, it's important to note, and all of us will recognize it, especially in this part of Europe, that yes, European Union is the biggest public investor in our countries. That's true, and we are very grateful for that, and we have to appreciate that solidarity. Nevertheless, it's very important, all of you, the stakeholders, to know how to demand more implementation tools, more simplification tools, because it's really very, very difficult to go from research to the implementation. It's very, very difficult to implement technology, for example, through the system of the public procurement. So how to procure innovations? The only answer is to innovate the procurement system, and our procurement system, which is pan-European, of course, it's harmonized. It's only 4 years old. So technology is developing and going ahead and ahead and ahead, and we are procuring like we were procuring in the last century. So the point is that it's very important to know our needs and to match them to the financing, and do it very much in advance, because otherwise we'll be lagging behind the technology and lagging behind the financing. At least one has to be avoided because it's very difficult to get. And very quickly at this stage, I will make an overview of all the possible, all 5 possible financing sources that are on our disposal at European level. These are, of course, the European structural and investment funds. These are the money which our governments use. This is European level funding programs, which are a lot of them, in the area of environment, in the area of research, in the area of climate change. Third one is the project development assistance, which is also on disposal of the cities and municipalities and towns. Then we have the new financial instruments system and institutions, and we have alternative financing schemes as well on our disposal. And all that combined, and as I said, unfortunately quite complex, needs to be researched very well and really implemented in the practice, because again, I finished when I started. Each of the priorities for the next programming period 2021 starting includes in its title either the word smart or digital, but it's up to us to make it a reality. Thank you. At this stage, that was it.
Thank you. Before I will give also a question to Mr. Podiet, I will also say to you all that you are also, of course, invited to put questions or comments. And after we answer this round of questions, I will also address you again. Mr. Podiet, you are developing also a mobile app for monitoring traffic optimization and introducing sustainable mobility, as I saw. Perhaps we should a little bit address also the sociological aspect of the questions of the smart cities and introducing the new technologies. So what are today's challenges of a modern man, let's say, who has to face all this technology, and how does this affect our society and also the social behavior behind it of people and also our environment, actually?
First of all, hello, I'm an anthropologist and I'm here, I suppose, to represent the people. And because this is what is lacking in development of smart technologies. Technologies are more and more smart. We have smartphones, smart cars, smart buildings, smart cities, and so on. But the people are as they were almost 100,000 years ago. Our processors are the same and they haven't significantly changed. And according to the Moore's law, the power of processors, the digital processors based on silicon doubles every year and a half. We are the same. And the problem is that we're getting smarter and smarter technologies and we are unable to communicate with them anymore and operate with them. This is not the problem of the people, it's the problem of the designers of the industry. Just an example from my own life. So I go to my mother's house in Celje now and then. She lives in Celje. And now she bought 2 years ago, I think, or so, a smart TV set, Philips. And then first we had to watch Slavko Bobonik on 3D because she has glasses. So we all had to put on 3D glasses and we were watching this Slavko Bobonik on TV. It was quite an interesting experience. But then I realized there is something wrong with these programs. They're strangely set on her TV. And I said, Mother, let me set up this TV for you so you will have the programs as they should be, like 1, 2, 3. I said, no, she said, don't touch this. You will ruin everything. What do you mean you will ruin everything? Look at this. And then she showed me the remote control. And I said, wow, this is a remote control. It has 50 buttons on the front. 50 buttons. And then I turned it around and it has 50 buttons on the back side. And they're giving my mother, who will be 70 next year, this kind of device in her hands. She's unable to use it. And I'm unable to use it. And I just let it where it is. And okay, I will not touch it. Just watch Slavko Bobonik on 3D and have your own experience. So another example, again from my own life. So I bought my first photo camera in 1995, a bit more expensive one. It had 5 buttons, and I could operate with it. Then I bought another one in 2010. It had 11 buttons, and I could still operate with it. And then I bought my most recent smart camera for actually my job bought it, so but I use it. And it costs over 600 euros, and it has 16 buttons. And some of them are marked with FN1, FN2, FN3, and FN4. In addition, I have on this camera a touch screen. And I'm afraid to touch it because, first of all, my fingers are not small enough, apparently, for this screen. And another problem is if I touch something, I will never be able to get back to the original settings. So this is a huge problem of the technology development. They're giving us technologies that are not adapted to the people. Because the designers and developers think if they give us more buttons, more everything, people will be happier. No, because when I bought this last camera, then I stepped out of this shop where I bought the camera, and then I saw in the shopping window on the top shelf something that I really needed. It was a Polaroid analog camera with one button. You have two versions. One costs 70 euros, another one 90. The one for 90 euros has a little mirror in the front side if you turn it around, so you can make a selfie. And this is what I actually needed as a human, as a user, like you call it. But I think we should avoid this word user, really, seriously. This is a bad word. This is what makes us very passive people. We should avoid words users, clients, customers, and so on. We are all people, and start developing solutions for the people. Start the people-centered development, which begins with identification of the people. The next step is analysis of their habits, needs, actual needs. Don't give us shitty products that are worthless and we will throw them away after 2 months or we will not use them at all because we will not be able to use them. Then make the interpretation of people's needs and involve people in this process and test the solution with the people. In this way, we will get really smart technologies, which will not be technology-driven, they will be people-driven. Because at the end of the day, it's people that will be using the technologies.
Thank you. I think this was a clear message. So now I would like to ask the public if there are any questions now already, or you're still thinking. Any comments? Then, if not, we will continue on. There are now, we actually started with quite a few issues, which we'll discuss also more of them. But I will now return to Mr. Mladen, and because to go back to the practice and to see, how actually this is done. And, in a city which wants to have such a project or wants to operate or integrate, how should it tackle this kind of challenge? I mean, probably it's different if you're a huge big city or if you're a small city or even if you're a village, So what is your experience?
Well, years ago, the idea behind bike sharing systems was that only the big cities are eligible or appropriate for bike sharing systems. But throughout the years, we saw that even the smallest communities could benefit from bike sharing systems. The only thing is that you have to scale and adapt the whole thing to the needs of the community. That's what we always emphasize when we talk to our word instead of clients. I'm sorry. Well, our customers, municipalities. The people, when we talk to the people that are supposed to buy things from us. So when we talk to them, we always emphasize that we are experts in specific technology, the bike sharing systems, and they are experts in and knowledgeable of the local specifics because there is no unique solution throughout the world. You can have one thing that represents something completely different on the other side of the world. So you always have to adapt the solution to the local community, to the local needs, which are also specific. So that's something we always emphasize. That's the one thing that is the right way to go, in my opinion. But that's only one part of the problem or solution. The other is that legislation, as we heard, legislation and rules of acquisition can be rigid sometimes. There are financing programs that span, like there's a defined program of financing for 5 or 4 years, or is it 5? 7, even 7 years. So in a span of 7 years, nothing can change, but technology changes rapidly. So European Union defines rules for financing for next 7 years, and in between things change completely. and this needs to adapt as well. I also agree with Mr. Podiet in regard to that we need to develop smarter, but I also, in my experience with bike sharing systems, we saw that we also need smart users. People are sometimes in a way not smart, but not because their hardware, their cerebral hardware is not up to date, but because they need. Again, we're talking about smart users. I'm using a story of a colleague of mine. Stories from Florida, from university, where they set their AC air conditioning to 25 degrees, or was it during the summer? I believe it was 25 degrees or less. And the people inside, some people, because it is warm climate, are wearing light clothes, and are actually feeling a bit cold inside. So instead of adapting the climate in the smart buildings, they have their personal heaters next to them, so they can heat. So we have an illogism, stupidity. We have at the same time we have cooling and heating because the systems are rigid.
Thank you. Mr. Podiet?
I'd like just to make a short comment on this. So we are doing in a project, Horizon 2020 project, Mobi Style, we're doing a research in smart buildings in Europe, and also in stupid buildings, but in buildings in general. And one of our cases is the smartest building in Central and Southeastern Europe, which is here in Ljubljana, one of the buildings of the University of Ljubljana, which has thousands of sensors, collects 20,000 of signals constantly, and records everything that is going on in the building. But the building is so smart that knows better than people what they need. And we realized that in summer, it's cooling the biggest room to the temperatures which are unbearable, and people had to wear winter jackets in summer almost. But the problem is that all commands were left to the building, because building knows better than the people. And there was nobody who could override this building, and it switches off and on the lights automatically. For example, if you start a beamer, it switches off the light in the room, of course, because you're not supposed to have light in the room. But a professor had a problem with that because he wanted to write on the blackboard while projecting something with the beamer. So he bought on Alibaba this kind of reflector for 40 euros and brings it with him every time he has a lecture. And people find ways to outsmart the smart buildings. They hack the buildings. And at the Faculty of Arts, where I teach, so we also outsmarted the building. It was not very smart, the solution actually. It was a solution that it was an automatic lock in all the doors, which was supposed to improve the teaching process and plus improve the control over the teachers, of course, because the deans would know when a certain person enters and leaves the room. But what happened? So for the first 15 minutes of the lecture, you were a gatekeeper. And I was just opening the doors for the students who were too late, and they kept knocking on the door. And then if somebody went to the toilet, I was a gatekeeper again and had to open the door for that person who went to the toilet, and so on. So what was the solution to outsmart this postmodern building, postmodern IT solution? So in every room, there was this wooden wedge to put it under the door. So in every room at the Faculty of Arts, you had this wooden, pre-modern device to hack the postmodern building. So people always find a way. Give them smart solutions, they will find even smarter solution to outsmart that solution.
That is actually quite great that we are still one step smarter. Yes, I saw once a question of what happens if an entire city, which has like an smart operating system, if what happens when it goes wrong, when it fails, all the systems. So there are security questions and other questions that you probably don't leave everything to the machines. Now this would be a little bit too much. And I read somewhere that actually the smart city is really just a perpetual beta city. You know, all the time, you know, you're in beta state, and all the time you have to do something, modifying. Never you are, you know, like you have the end product there. Any questions by our public? Not yet. Okay. Then I will go back to Mr. Yuan, because perhaps from your experience, what do you think that has to be changed for easier, more comprehensive implementation of the new technologies, you know, with such smart technologies? What you would need as a city to do these things simpler? Perhaps some more help from the state, some more help from otherwise.
Well, one thing is for sure, we have over 200 municipalities. A lot of times, same solutions are basically the way to implement it are invented maybe not 200 times, but 20, 30 times, which is in a way not very efficient way. So yeah, sometimes you do feel like you would need some sort of, how to say, this initial research, what kind of solutions are actually beneficial. Because like I said before, there are many companies, there are many solutions that, let's say, producer tries to sell to you, but you don't have time, you don't have human resources to actually make deep scanning. You know, is this if this is the solution that you need? So I guess we don't have a regional level. I think this is a big issue. We only have state level and municipality level. This is something that I really miss sometimes, especially with a bigger project like big infrastructure, also smart city solutions. I think they fell into this category. I don't have a this thing, like the defined idea what do we need, but I feel this lack between let's say there's a public tender, there's a government policy, and then there are like providers of partial solution, and you have to define your strategy. What do you want? What are your bits and pieces to come to your goal? So yeah, we are missing something. I cannot tell you why, but maybe regional level, which probably won't happen for a while, but this will be probably beneficial.
Yes, please.
May I comment? Thank you, Gregor, on that, because I feel it's very important and it has to do with my topic. You feel that gap, you know why? Because sometimes, and it's where your governments, our negotiators now are negotiating the new financial framework, have to act more vigorously. Because, of course, when spending public money, we are talking about the European funds now, when spending public money, of course, everybody who spends them, especially in Brussels, they think they have to do utmost use of it. Of course, be very transparent, do visible things for us, all the Europeans. And by doing that, it's a trend now to go to large-scale projects, to seek for the economy of scale, everything to be at a large, size, but how large is Slovenia? I mean, come on. Okay, Bulgaria is a bit larger, but not that much. So it's very important also to you to seek and to demand solutions, and all of us to look for solutions also for smaller scale, but not less smart. Thank you.
Yes, perhaps here we can also address this question. If this, some cities or even regions get so smart, then probably the others don't having that luck. Because especially if you have low-income countries or where where they have only perhaps a few smart cities. So what is happening then with the West, with the other cities in the region? It's perhaps if we can address this issue about perhaps Mr. Clement.
Well, I think, as I have said previously, I believe that smart cities, given the climate change, are a necessity. So it's something that's actually the idea is not that old at all. I mean, first smart cities were built in Japan not so long ago, maybe a couple of years, really. So this is not that new. I mean, the concepts are new. The international standardization organization standards are relatively new as well, adopted last year. So we are discussing really ideas which are quite new, which are necessary, where we will all have to learn. And of course, there will always be some municipalities or cities which will be the first or the second, and there will be a lot of them which will lag behind and learn from the ones that were faster. Anyhow, I think that this concept of smart cities should be supported at the government level, and I must say that it definitely goes for Slovenia. It is also written in the coalition agreement, which was signed this year. So there's definitely support for smart communities and all that follows, of course, in all other areas. And of course, when regions were mentioned, this is extremely important, because sometimes it is not economical to do some things alone. Neither for one municipality, you know, sometimes there is not enough knowledge in a certain municipality. Sometimes there are not insufficient resources. So the point is that municipalities combine efforts, and smart cities is all about really cooperation, partnership, and all these things. And by joining resources and projects, for example, district heating solutions or intercity logistics, even health or education services, you can achieve great savings, and at the end of the day get better quality of service for people. So I think that these new ideas are really to be debated about. Definitely public inclusive. I think that's very important, that we are aware that not all of us are 30 years old and computer geeks. Yeah, we are. Society is getting older, and all people that are disadvantaged for one reason or another should definitely be included when, let's say, designing smart cities or smart communities. So yeah, I mean, probably we don't have an answer for all questions today, but we will learn. It's a part of learning curve. So, thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
I will just add something, which was previously said. If we have a topic, smart cities and communities, and we have also EU regional development. So, in my opinion, it's smart cities are also all about interconnectivity. We have, as I said, plethora of solutions and high-tech solutions and concepts, which all interconnect into one big smart city. And on the other hand, we have regions which are consisted of cities. So my comment is that it's still on a drawing board, but there are efforts in Carniola, this is Gorenjska region of Slovenia, where all municipalities are trying to connect their already existing smart bike sharing systems. So that's one example of regional development through smart cities. As I said, this is one of the most visible solutions today within smart cities bike sharing systems, and bike sharing system is a champion of sustainable mobility right now. So this is one good example of how connecting all the municipalities and cities within the Gorenjska region will I believe it will make a change. It will further and enable other efforts of connecting. Because it's hard to connect if we're talking about energy optimization, connecting the cities. It can be done, but the first step is connecting through transportation mobility. And there's also another example. One things are literally hardware solutions. We have equipment, and then there are administrative solutions when we are talking about apps. And there was this cooperation between Slovenia and Italy throughout the hospital in I believe it was in Nova Gorica and Gorizia, where they cooperated into fusing one system where they could exchange patients and doctors given how much cases they had, or if they had empty capacities, they could take patients from each other. So that's a good example of connecting and cooperating. So that was my take on regional development through my specific case.
Yes, I think Mr. Padit, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, so I think we've heard two really important things also regarding what you said. First thing is that we and it was also presented here in the speech before, at the introductory speech, so we shouldn't try to find one-size-fits-all universal solutions for all cities, for all regions, for everyone. This is a big problem. Also, when we design the smart cities, often I hear the word Copenhagenization. It's a difficult word to pronounce, but I've heard it quite often. So we want to make all cities in Europe and elsewhere more like Copenhagen, because Copenhagen is supposed to be really people-friendly, right? I'm not sure about it. I mean, Ljubljana needs to be Ljubljanalized or whatever, like Belgrade needs to be Belgradized. When we carried out a research regarding driving habits, which was the basis of development of a smartphone app for motivating people to change their habits on the road, accidentally I found out that I really like traffic, public traffic in Belgrade, which is horrible infrastructurally. I mean, you have really old buses, they are not accurate, as in Copenhagen. They're really crowded. When the door opens, there are hundreds of people inside who usually don't even pay for the ride. But what matters is when the door opened, and I was there with 3 children, 3 boys. At that time they were 1, 4, and 9 years old. So people always came down and helped me with the pushchair to go up on board, and then they put the little one on a lap of one woman there and moved another young girl away like she was 16, 17. You sat enough in your life, move away, here's a child, don't you see? Then they sat and people kept talking to me, oh, from Slovenia, right, 3 boys strong, wow, nice. And this is what I really liked. I felt there like being welcome, being part of the community, and it was totally non-technological solution. In Copenhagen, sorry, it doesn't happen. What happened to me in Durham, where we also did this study, the same situation. Bus arrives to the bus station, the door opens, I want to go up, but the bus was almost empty, and the driver said, no, sorry, you cannot enter the bus. Why not? There are already 2 push chairs on board, so according to the regulations, you're not allowed to enter. And I had to wait half an hour for another bus. In Serbia, they would throw out the driver instantly from the bus, because they're really people-centered, child-oriented society. They touch children, and they touched my children, and I didn't feel bad because of it. They still communicate with each other on the bus. And this is what I want in the cities of the future. For me, this is a smart city and a smart solution. And this is why I would rather say that we should Belgradize Ljubljana and Copenhagen, and not Copenhagenize all other cities.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Yuan?
Well, you gave me some time to think. So, anyway, we had one cooperation in a public tender for like that goes into the smart city solution, which is like a app that's basically app that includes all identification for all city services and also payment. It was done by 4 city municipalities, so we team up. Okay, this is, let's say, a good example, but maybe the thing that sometimes the city municipalities were looking for solutions in association of city municipalities, that there could be space for development these embryos into something that has a taste and feeling what is it all about, or I guess some funding just for development projects, even though that maybe 70% will never brought into life, would be very useful, because then you have money, somebody helps you to actually gather expertise, have some time to think, because otherwise usually falls to one poor guy and it's all about him, you know. If he is smart enough, he will push this thing through. If not, he will probably fail and you know, the train will move on. So yeah, this is what I wanted to add to your initial question.
Thank you. And now we have a question or comment from the public. Ms. Felicita Medved.
Well, my name is Felicita Medved, and I thank you for a very interesting panel. Specifically because we move not only from the smart cities and communities, but also to the identity of the cities, and perhaps the question of human alienation in this development. Before the nation states, we had an empire, and they were cities and regions, so-called free cities and regions. I live a few kilometers from Ljubljana, from Brezovica, that's about 5 kilometers from here. And it is very difficult for me to say that my community is a smart community in the sense of innovation and new technology and so on. So my question, in fact, is, okay, let's say that 80% of human population will live in cities. In Slovenia, that will probably not be so, because we don't even have a physical space for development of cities as such. But of course, we are urbanized. So my question is really a question mark of this title of the panel. Are smart cities then indeed a step towards a more balanced regional development? If we think of the study which was presented to us, and that is the divide in GDP per capita in regions, which clearly we saw the so-called old Europe and new Europe. And also if you look at the political development and of the closure of societies in the present-day EU, do you think that in, let's say, 33 decades or half a century, that it will indeed be the smartness, the good policies, or will be just the fate and fortune to contribute to the development of regions? Because if technological sense, if I understood you correctly, and I think I did, this human touch, the human-centered development that I agree with you, Mr. Dan Podiet, yeah, that this is missing we often feel, I believe, alienated from each other, that there is no human connection, not enough sense of belonging, not only to a local community or national community or the EU, but indeed to humanity as such. Yeah? So maybe in, I don't know, in half a century time or even before, we will be not only users and clients, but indeed only human assistance to the so-called virtual avatar that we now experience in probation in some of European airports. So what do you see in, let's say, half a century? Will these contribute to balanced and sustainable development of regions of the EU or not?
Thank you. Who would like to try?
Just a quick reply. So according to Ray Kurzweil, the futurologist who works for Google now, we will be anyway uploaded to the Matrix by 2045, all of us. So you're right from that perspective, and we will not have any physical problems anymore. But what is, in my opinion, the problem, and you're right about it, because we are more and more crowded, we are more and more alienated. Everyone who lives in a block of flat can experience that. So you don't even greet your neighbors if there are more than 150 of you living in the same block of flats. If there are only 6 neighbors around in houses, you greet them, you help them. The more crowded we are, the less connected we are. Where is the problem? Again, in our processors, our brain. We have a cognitive limit, a cognitive capacity, which is the so-called Dunbar number. Not Dunbar, but Dunbar. So, because Dunbar is an anthropologist who realized that the number of people that we can make contacts with, really deep contacts, is 150. And we cannot go cognitively above this level. I mean, you can have thousands of friends on Facebook and LinkedIn, but these are not your friends. I mean, realize that. And you can keep really deep contacts only with 150 people in your life, period. And we will not change in the future, the humans. So we need new types of communities to keep us together in the crowded cities of the future. In a couple of decades, 80% of the population will live in much more dense cities as we live now. And the biggest cities of the future will be really huge, like 100 million people living in these huge areas. And I don't know what will happen in Slovenia. Perhaps we will be some kind of oasis of the future before this year, 2045, when we will anyway have this peace, according to Kurzweil.
Thank you. Please, Madam.
Yes, I agree with what you heard. We are in somewhat of an anomaly. Slovenia is not very densely populated, but we are still rather urbanized. I'm going to share with you a story. I was present in this joint meeting of mayors from Kozjansko region, which we could say that it's less developed region of Slovenia. And there was also a person from government, I'm not sure who that was, that explained the new prospects of European funding. And they patiently waited for 45 minutes to an hour to listen to everything they had to say, and in the end said, okay, now you are presenting us with all the prospects for financing all different kinds of, I don't know, Wi-Fi networks for municipality and such, but we need roads. And that person said, well, I'm sorry, the roads were in the previous program. Now we have only smart solutions. So that's one problem, because we still have communities and parts of Slovenia and other parts of Europe that are less developed. And in my opinion, we are not hermits. We still need, although we need sensible, but we still need sensible development of environment. We need infrastructure to a certain extent. I'm not saying that we need to live in a concrete jungle, but there are still certain minimum standards that we need for civilization, and civilization further on drives the further development. But yes, I agree, we are somewhat lost in this digital age. That's the other thing that I would like to comment, that we tend to lose ourselves and let technology rules us instead of us using the technology. That's the main problem also with developing technologies. This is a completely different topic, but I can just comment that technology these days, and especially technology that is intended for people, I won't say users, is driven and oriented in such a way that it addicts you more and more. More you use it, you're more addicted. So that's also one of the problems. In urbanized, in digitalized village, usually people would greet or go to their next door neighbor and say hi and chat. Now these days they probably use some kind of instant messenger, or maybe they like some post or comment online instead of going to that person. I suspect there are exceptions to this case, where people take extra effort and care to grow and still have some sensible interhuman relationship, like physical up close. But we are losing ourselves in this modern age.
So this is what Sherry Turkle, one sociologist, says. She calls this alone together. Because of technologies, because we are more connected, we are more alone. Because of Facebook, because of all these smartphones that we have, we sit in the bus and we watch in the screen instead of watching around us what is going on.
Well, in Ljubljana it's a problem because all the buses are with advertisement all around and you cannot watch out, so. Actually, yes, please, Mr. Clem.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is that when the question was about the future, whether it be the old Europe winning the prize, or is it really a matter of fate or whatever, or being smart, well, I think it's really up to us. So we know that the continental Europe is a bit, the western part of it is a bit in front of us. So I believe that we know where we are, and it's up to us what we will do with that and what we will do with future. Now, the fact that Slovenia, that population is in Slovenia is dispersed is actually not a coincidence. It's a result of past policy where actually people were not encouraged to move to cities, which is good. And I don't see any reason really to change that policy. It is good that rural area is not empty, and there is no point in all of us just living in cities. Why? The nature is beautiful. On the other side, when we talk, for example, when we discuss smart cities, it's actually a lot about sustainability, and when you think about the architecture of smart cities, you usually think of city centers without cars, buses, and so on. So what you really see in the city centers are people walking or using a bicycle or something like that. And if you look at the old part of Ljubljana, as soon as you got the cars out, people started walking there, and it became a part of social life. So there's a very positive development, I believe, when you actually take out of the city centers what really doesn't belong there. So on the other hand, smart regions could actually, people were made to move, not to sit and look at monitors and type on their smartphones. So it's really a task. Smart regions should start building routes for bicycles, and that's something that we pushed strongly in the last 4 years, for example. But because it positively influences health, it decreases crime, it saves energy, it makes the environment better. That's smart. It's very simple, but that's smart. So I believe that the future, it depends on what we really feel the smart future or smart cities should look like, and it's up to us what we will do about it, and how the future will look. Thank you.
Please, Padit.
So again, what you said is really important. By the way, there is a new saying for the 21st century: sitting is new smoking. And we have turned in this course of evolution from this bipedal mammals into creatures which are more like corals, sedentary creatures. According to the statistics from the US, the adults sit 9.3 hours per day. According to the statistics from the UK and Ireland, young ones, 16, 17, 18 years old, sit, lay, or sleep, or are in any other way passive, not moving, for over 19 hours a day. So they move, the young ones move actually 5 hours per day. And so we have to start making solutions which will make people move again. And this was also the basis of the app that we made in the Drive Green project. So our original idea was dismissed because it was we wanted to make something that shows the drivers how good they drive and how much they reduce the CO2 emissions by driving better. But then during the people-centered approach with ethnography in different cities, we realized that first of all, it's really stupid to persuade people to use smartphones in their cars. Second, it's people don't care about these little savings that can be made by driving more carefully. And third, what people care about is health and well-being, but they don't do anything about it. They just want to live a better, healthier life, but they go to the nearest shopping center by car. And this is when we had to make a shift in the development process into something that can reduce CO2 emissions not only by 10%, like you can do actually by smartphone apps, but you can reduce it for 100%. How? So you don't go to work by car. You go on foot. It's like a minimal thing. But we do things so automatically, and our lives are really so based on cars, and that we just sit in the car, drive to the work because we think it's more convenient. In Ljubljana, for example, every day 130,000 people comes by, many of them, or most of them by cars. And if we would change our mindsets into, and if we would allow the people who drive also because of the dispersed population in Slovenia from villages to Ljubljana, if we would allow them to work from home, I'm sure half of the people that come to Ljubljana don't have to come to Ljubljana at all. We would solve like CO2 emission problems, we would save people's time, and we would make a solution which is totally non-technological again, which would be smart and would be beneficial for the city, for the villages, for the whole region. So these are really these minimal investments which are just changed mindsets.
Thank you. Mr. Malcolm.
Sorry, just to add to your point, I'm sure some of you have been to Brussels and noticed the air pollution problem over there. I spent the last year over in Brussels, and I was told the reason why there's such a big problem with pollution is because people are really, like you've mentioned, not incentivized to walk or use the public transportation system, and because companies will offer, instead of a higher salary, will give people a company car. So even if the distance between their house to their place of work is not that far, whereby they could use a bicycle or a metro, they will still drive, and that creates congestion, it creates air pollution problems, health problems, and so forth. So it also has to come from companies changing their mindset of taking this into consideration.
Perhaps we actually can stay with you because environmental challenges are quite important also for the smart cities. I think we were also discussing about, for example, what do you consider or interpret as a smart development in a smart city?
You can interpret it in many different ways, but from my perspective, smart solutions are solutions that will improve air quality in the cities. And incentivize people to change people's mindsets to use their bicycles or walk more. I can give an example of what I consider a smart solution. For example, is using or electrifying construction site machineries. For example, because pollution in construction sites in many major European cities is still a big problem. For example, in Oslo, CO2 emissions from construction sites represent, I think, are 18% of all emissions. And government there were considering doing something about it. So in their procurement process, what they've decided was to see how the market would respond. In the tender documents, they've said that for constructing 4 public schools and I think it was a football stadium, that construction sites have to be near or zero emissions. And what happened was they had no problems finding companies who were able to provide that. So all the 4 public schools were built with zero emissions. So I think it has to come also from governments and to do something about that. And another, I guess what I consider a smart solution is I was recently in Graz at the informal meeting of transport and environment ministers, and we visited some local companies, and there was one that presented kind of an Uber-like system for trash collection. For example, for construction sites, you could you can use an app and say like I have this trash, and then you would show you which trash trucks are in the area, and that would be able to pick it up most efficiently. I mean, it's still in the process of development, but it's just kind of like an idea that could be implemented, and that would solve all sorts of problems and be cheaper as well.
Good, thank you. Quite a good example, actually. Ms. Zucchiati, so in your, you saw now what are actually issues, problems, which products they need to make a better smart cities. So in your partnership, what actually are your partners developing, or you saw some good experience from the past, and at what we are good perhaps in Slovenia, what we should do better?
Yes, we must say that in Slovenia, smart cities, it is not the point. It is, we can say, about towns, because it is no cities in Slovenia. But what can we make? It is, we have a real potential to take our populated world into a new era where we have more control over our resource use. We can create more sustainable living environments, but to ensure that this does not come at the cost of personal privacy. We have to be sure that privacy is part of the design. And for our government, we wish that that should be adopted a strategy over more years. We have strategy, but we hope that will be more as only this.
Well, actually true, because all this big data which the cities are collecting, as I said before, could be problematic, because who has the data has the power, they say. So people should have some kind of influence to it, to at least some kind of basic access to see what is collected on them. What is also quite, by any chance, any question more from the public? Not to, Mr. Please. There it is.
Thank you, Gregor. Matej Javornik, City Councillor from Ljubljana. I have a question. Where is Ljubljana in this story? We heard that Ljubljana is a town. Is Ljubljana a smart town? Where it will be a smart town? It should be, who should be the drivers in this story? And for Madame Zlatanova, you said that financial finance will be, hardly to achieve due to these new financial regulations. And what should the city management to do to get these funds for this investment? Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps somebody wants to comment on Ljubljana or directly to finances? Ljubljana, please.
Hello. If I understood correctly, you are from municipality of Ljubljana. I can recall a test project, pilot project in Ljubljana. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a project of city-wide application software that collected all kinds of data that went directly straight to the mayor of Ljubljana, and he had at the tip of his finger, he could recall every ongoing project, every detail, every piece of data that is collected from let's say, from sensors for air pollution and traffic measures and stuff. I remember it was test, it was pilot project. I'm not sure at what stage it is now or where it went altogether, but I believe it's a good practice where you can use in a smart way. You can use all the data and optimize one city.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Don't take me wrong. European funds are complex by definition. We have 50 buttons on the remote control to plan. Everybody knows that. Nevertheless, we are constantly, all of us, trying to make it more easy. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not. To simplify, so-called simplification is all the time going, but nevertheless, you have, at least you have your experts, your public resources to do so. But nevertheless, what seems to me very important is that you as people who take decisions should very carefully take on board these strategies, just to assess what you need exactly and not to spare resources, because we have small administrations, we have small countries, and it's better to plan good instead of just having some fashion, going out of the fashion and have something you don't need. Because going back to the question, what is a smart city? You can see its analysis of the European Parliament that is called Mapping Smart Cities in Europe. And the first chapter is devoted on the question, what is a smart city actually? We don't have a common definition in Europe, what is a smart city? Me personally, as a former environmentalist, above all, I think, as also the colleague here said, it's a city, smart city, it's a thing that was first invented in order to spare resources, have the clean air, have a better environment, a carbon-free economy, if possible, or less carbon economy, to have all this comfort of life for its citizens. And I think, as far as I know, Ljubljana has a good air quality, not a problem anyhow. As far as I can see, maybe you have just to invest to sustain, of course to improve if you can, but to sustain these levels, you have, unlike other cities in Europe that are not that good air quality, pollution, bad transport, of course, it's also due to the sizes of different cities, etc. But I think planning and carefully assessing the needs, for me, is the most important. Otherwise, you will not have the right resources. Thank you. I hope this is useful.
Any would like to comment, please?
Yeah, just a quick comment about what worries me, and this is what connected to what Mrs. Nevenka Tsukyati said. Why we will use the sensors in the future to control the citizens more, like is happening now in China with the social rating system. So this will be the future, which was nicely described in 1984 novel, and we will use the technologies to supervise the citizens. We will install more cameras in the city to penalize those who make offenses, like is going now in the city which is actually more or less a state, and this will be also one of the futures of the cities. They will become more states like cities, and because the national states are dissolving, and cities are definitely the future in Singapore. So Singapore is one of the countries with the highest level of satisfaction of citizens. Even though it is half totalitarian state which is controlled by technologies. For example, they're installing in cars in Singapore the GPS-based devices which constantly track the cars, and if you overspeed in a certain part of the city, you're automatically penalized. There's no police anymore. The money is automatically taken from your bank account, and you just get a receipt how much was taken off. And this is the future that is waiting us too. Because this is what we are developing and installing in the smart vehicles. The ecosystem, for example, which is now designed for the intervention, the ambulance to come faster to the place where the accident happened. So why we will have this kind of devices in the future? Well, to control the drivers. We will check the black box and see how did that person drive right before the event, and then you will not get an insurance because you drew 70 instead of 60 on a certain part of the city. We don't even need to install anything in vehicles because we have our smartphones which know everything. So we are already living in a society which is totally technology based, and we are letting our privacy go. We had privacy for approximately 200 years in human history. So privacy is something relatively new, and we're just letting it go for peanuts. What is Google giving us for using Google Maps? Nothing. And there is not much sense even of Google Maps for me, of my private life, except that I can use it in car. I mean, but they're getting so much information from us, and these are private companies that are tracking us day by day. This is what worries me. Private companies, 4 of them, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and who knows which is the 4th one. Which one? Microsoft will control our lives in the future. They will control the cities. It will not be us anymore. So this is what really worries me.
This is actually quite a topic. I mean, it is interesting that we are actually returning to the Aristotle's city-states now, which they were once already, and we are turning back like in a circle. I think, yeah.
I just said that Belgrade will save us, maybe.
Any questions here from public? What is if we talked actually a lot about us and our cities, but this smart has also to be created somewhere, or this technology and all these things. So, and usually, for example, I don't know, the raw materials for the batteries are coming from developing countries. You know, for example, cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo, or by the production of lithium, there are several environmental impacts, as there are in the salt lakes, and there is also water scarcity in the Republic of Chile. So, how should we tackle these kind of issues as our smart society here? Should we? I mean, there are also potential health consequences, as is for us, as also for people there. And how could this be compensated socially? If there is a comment?
Well, it's a rather complex question. I'm not sure what it combined all together can give you a proper answer, but it transcends basically technology and everything. It addresses humanity. We are talking about sharing resources, those that have in abundance something that give to the others, and vice versa, because everyone has something to share and offer. But it transcends everything. I mean, it's too great of a question to address, I believe. If we are talking about shortage of water in some areas, we are talking globally. It's something that we need to address, but
yeah, but it's happening because of are being smart here.
Of course,
using
there's
autonomous cars and
yes.
electric cars and all kind of things. Somewhere has to
I agree
be
that current development and consumer electronics they need to be checked in line, because we are buying our cell phones every year. There is a new model. From this, I believe this year was a record year, because in short span of time, in 3 months from September or in 2 months till the end of October, there are 7 major or 8 major flagship mobile phones released. It's a craze. So maybe we have too much money as a society, so we can afford things because they are really expensive. So we need to change. As I previously commented, we need a shift in our mentality, and we need to start using technology, not the other way around. We can't be commanded by new gadgets and new things, although it's alluring.
Thank you.
Yeah, the answer is actually very simple. I mean, we're buying too much. We have too many things in our life, and according to one research, we have in our homes up to 200,000 objects. So from the needle to the washing machine, and it's too much. I mean, and our homes are bigger because of it. We were wasting space. We're buying cars which stand for 90% of time and more. 95% of time a car is still. And we are not using the machines that we have. I mean, if we would share, like you suggested, this kind of things, these are the smart solutions for the future. And first to solve with ourselves individually that we don't need so many things. Like, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm saying this from my personal experience. We have so many things in our home that we have to move them eventually to the garage and to the cellar, and these places are some kind of purgatoriums for things which we just keep because, and we don't use garage for cars anymore, we just keep it for things. I think smart cities of the future will be also the cities where we will reduce number of things that we have for ourselves. But this is again changing the mindset. Do we really need so much? And this will be a big challenge. With less things, we will have less garbage. Waste is a big issue. How to get rid of waste? So you mentioned that we are trying to find new solutions for waste management in cities. In the next 30 years, the global waste production will rise by 70%. So we will be, the whole planet will be just one big pile of waste if we don't do something. And New York, for example, has huge problems with it, and other cities too. Not only New York, Ljubljana, Zagreb, because they don't have anywhere to put waste anymore, because they don't have any place to put it. And fresh kills in New York is actually the biggest object, human-made object. It's the landfill of New York. It's approximately 2 by 2 kilometers and 300 meters high. So it's the one, you cannot see actually the Chinese wall from the moon, but you can see the fresh kills, the landfill of New York, because it's so huge. We're just piling the planet with garbage.
Thank you. Yes, garbage is, of course, it's a huge problem which we have to resolve. Another thing is also the energy consumption in general, because so here is perhaps if we address a little bit also the importance of renewable energy systems, and I will give the word to you, Mr. Lemon.
Yeah, well, energy consumption is directly correlated with population growth. So, and the population growth is growing exponentially, really. So that represents a huge pressure on natural resources, of course. And you know, when we also say that we will lower the greenhouse gas emissions, that we will use more renewable resources, I mean, with the available renewable resources, we have a problem with such a growth. It's unsustainable, really. So, whatever what we can do anyway is to really make the use of energy efficient. And as I mentioned, 60% of energy is used in the cities, so the potential as well is huge. Only with better isolation, really we can virtually get zero energy houses and or buildings. So that's one thing. On the other side, and that's about the mental shift we discussed earlier. It's really phasing out private transport with public transport, and also walking more, bicycling more, because it also has positive implications on health, as mentioned. So energy will represent definitely a huge challenge in the future. It will most probably get more expensive, but that's not the point. The point is that we should be starting consuming less and saving more, and henceforth protecting the planet.
And if you will say now, I don't know, in 50 years in the future, are going to be the renewable energy system enough, or we will still need to build new nuclear power plants and fusion power plants and?
Well, the world hopes for fusion reactors to become commercial, because the conventional energy resources will not be sufficient, and I'm quite certain, unfortunately, with such population growth, renewable resources will not be sufficient. So there's hope that nuclear fusion, which should be much safer, and also the units itself are supposed to be smaller and let's say produced for local communities, really for municipalities. But of course, the discussion about nuclear fusion is 30 years old, and 30 years ago the scientists said fusion, which is much safer and less problematic, because at the end there's no radiation and so on, virtually no radiation, is 30 years away, and every year or every decade the technology is 30 years away. So today we don't have it. It's a question of whether we will have it in 30 years. So the energy will become scarcer and more expensive, definitely.
Okay, please. I have yes.
Just another comment to perceived future lack of energy. For instance, we're all heading towards electric cars in future. Imagine overnight we all switch to electric cars, everyone has one in his backyard or wherever, and imagine we all come home from work and plug in our electric cars for charging. Imagine what would that do to current grid. It would go down in milliseconds. So also when we are talking about development, about the future possible solutions, albeit they are really great solutions, in a way we have still so many obstacles on its way to address, and that's one of it that comes to mind when you were talking about energy and resources.
Please, just because it was directly addressed.
Well, that's very important. And of course, when we think about including renewables, which are smaller, more dispersed, more unpredictable, into the grid, when we are connecting electric cars, heat pumps into the same grid, when households they become not only people consuming, but also people producing, because they have photovoltaics on their roofs and so on. They become prosumers. I mean, the grid becomes complicated, and that's why, of course, there are a lot of projects in Slovenia in the field of smart grids. But smart grids are beautiful. They are part of smart cities and everything. These projects are very successful. In Slovenia also what Institute Jožef Stefan is doing is going in the right direction. Unfortunately, smart grids can only solve part of the problem. Yes.
Not production.
No.
Thank you. Mr. Ivan, please.
Well, as I understood, I think I make my this thesis 10 years ago. There was 45% of energy consumption was in the buildings. Maybe it was 15 years ago. Well, we were pretty successful with buildings. We're not so successful with transport. As I understood, the transport in last 2 decades basically tripled or more than doubled, I'm sure about that. And apparently, from what I read, part of the reason is that everybody's afraid of putting some sort of restriction on the transport, because transport equals GDP, our mean growth of GDP, kind of have some sort of correlations. The more we produce, the more we spend, the more services. It's all had to do with the energy. Okay, some countries are much more efficient with, let's say, GDP per whatever unit energy we use it. So I guess this is a very big question, and including this electrification of our mobility. Definitely, in my opinion, and I was also part of the panel 2 months ago, there was like Slovenian, let's say, industry and some of your colleagues, I think, and we were discussing, and nobody had solution, because people said, yeah, okay, we have solution. When you come from work, you charge from home, right? No. The solution is actually you charge at work. No. You actually charge at public parking spaces. So where do you charge your car? So, one of the participants that actually develops charging station, he said, yeah, actually these fast charging stations, it seems they're not going to be solutions. So it will have to be very dispersed. And for this, you actually need very smart solutions when you can actually use the periods when the electric consumption is quite low. Another issue, I think the electrification of all kind of transport is a little bit ridiculous. Because why would you put 40 ton of truck that has to go through half of Europe to, I don't know, 10 tons of battery and supercharger of, I don't know, 300 kilowatts? I think it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's too expensive. It's like not efficient at all. But I think for city centers and micromobility, it's working great already. It's for electric bike, for tiny vehicles, for short distances, probably combining with autonomous mobility, when actually the unit itself can charge whatever is actually the best time to go there and to be charged. This is probably a solution. We will we will use a lot of public space. We gather more public space, less noise. And one thing I was always very try to point out, it's not about just saving energy, it's about saving space as well, because usual consumer person needs 3 parking places, one at work, one at home, and one at, let's say, afternoon activity. And I think part of the smart city solutions, I think it will actually, spatial planning, it's still, I mean, it's not the whole solution. We heard, yeah, villages are great. It's not a bad solution to have more dispersed. Also the compact city, it's not ideal solution for everything, but it will have to be solutions where actually we need less traveling. That is probably part of solution. So these are my thoughts about this issue.
Yeah, so I agree that, okay, I don't know if I agree, but I would like to emphasize that car with internal combustion was apparently now the wrong way of the 20th century. And I think that electric car is the wrong way of the 21st century. We should not buy more electric cars because it's extremely expensive and energy, lots of energy is consumed to produce new electric cars, which then you have to sell, I don't know, after 5 or 7 years because you buy another one and another one and another one. We have to change the ways we live. And something came up to my mind for the cities of the future and societies of the future. We should work less. I mean, why do we work like crazy? First of all, technologies should work for us. The robots, they promised us robots 50 years ago that they would do the dishes instead of us. Okay, we have the washing machine, but it's not the whole thing. They should also do the other things in the households. But we should also, if we worked less, we would have, and being satisfied with less things in our homes, and travel less, for example, because we don't have to travel so much. I think the future would be better for everyone. I mean, let's work 3 to 5 hours per day, as we used to work in the Neolithics. We discussed this in another panel discussion. So there is one book of Marshall Sahlins, The Stone Age Economics, which explains that the people in Neolithics worked 3 to 5 hours per day, maximum, for hunting, gathering, and they had then all the rest of the day for singing, dancing, having fun, having sex, and normal things like that. And we were just wasting time. And for getting more money, for buying new things. And what's the result? I mean, all the shit that we produce for the planet. We spend more energy, we make more things, we make more plastics. No benefits, actually. Let's satisfy with less. Do we need so much?
Thank you. I think that we are quite exhausted, quite a lot of questions, not all of them, and tackled a lot of issues. So let me, for the end, just quote from Shakespeare's Coriolanus: "What is the city but the people?" And also, this basically means that the urban planners and architects today, they should actually work together with other experts, such as sociologists, anthropologists, and psychologists, you know, to actually understand the so-called end user, the people, the citizens. And the last thought, perhaps because it was mentioned here, which basically it is then more sharing, less owning, I would say. Thank you. Thank you, guests. Thank you also from the public for your cooperation. And I wish you a great evening, and I let the word to our moderator.
You know, you just, you had pointed out a lot of real life, concrete example, but you know, in the field thank you, of creating the future, like you said, you know, a happy society that wants to live smartly in the symbiosis of manufacturing. There are so many sensitive parts, like you said, maybe work and friends, family, health, and maybe we can mention here even soul, you know. But there is much more coordinating taking place. But yes, this is maybe a new topic for maybe that kind of meeting. But you might talk about more this in maybe now into the informal atmosphere, because we are inviting you to the next hall, and we can maybe just have conversation on this topic further. I just want to say thank you for your participating, and maybe for just you active listeners. Have a good evening, and thank you. Goodbye.